Let's talk about a man you've probably never heard of, but whose work has completely changed the way we think about food. His name was Francisco Grande Covián, and his story is this incredible journey through science, the chaos of war, and, well, the very meaning of nutrition itself.
And this quote, it pretty much sums up his entire life's work. Man first wanted to eat to survive. Now, moreover, he wants to eat for health. It sounds simple, right? But it's actually a really profound idea. He captured this huge shift from just trying to get enough calories to not die, to understanding that our food is a tool. It's a way to live a better, healthier life. That idea was his North Star.
So, who exactly was this guy? I can tell you his life was not spent in some quiet, sterile lab. No. His story was forged in the cultural heart of Spain, it was tested in the absolute crucible of a civil war, and it was ultimately redefined by exile. It's a story about resilience just as much as it is about research.
To really get who he was as a scientist, you have to start with the man, the humanist, and his story kicks off in one of the most intellectually exciting places in all of Europe at the time.
You know, he wasn't just some scientist locked away in a bubble. At Madrid's famous Residencia de Estudiantes, he was literally surrounded by giants. I mean, can you imagine living down the hall from the poet Federico Garcia Lorca and the filmmaker Luis Buñuel? He also became lifelong friends with Severo Ochoa, who'd go on to win a Nobel Prize. And get this, people said you could hear them singing opera arias to each other from their labs. So, yeah, this was way more than just a school. It was this incredible melting pot of art, culture, and science.
After that, his training was basically a grand tour of Europe's top labs. He went to Germany for neurophysiology, then off to Denmark to work on nutrition with a Nobel laureate, and then to Sweden and England for biochemistry. And it was in Denmark that he met a young American scientist named Ancel Keys. Now remember that name. That meeting would end up changing both of their lives, big time, decades later.
But right when his career was really starting to take off, his entire world was flipped upside down. The Spanish Civil War became the defining event of his life, and it turned him from a physiologist in a lab into a nutritionist on the front lines of a massive humanitarian crisis.
By 1937, Madrid was under siege. The people were starving. And Grande Covián was put in charge of studying the horrific effects of malnutrition. For him, the entire city became, well, a tragic open-air laboratory, where the worst of humanity gave him the toughest lessons in the science of survival.
And the scale of what he was facing, it is just staggering. He was dealing with an epidemic of pellagra, this awful disease caused by a nutrient deficiency. He personally was in charge of treating an estimated 30,000 patients. Just let that number sink in. 30,000 people. This wasn't theoretical science anymore. This was a desperate race against time.
So what did he do? I mean, how do you even tackle that? First, he figured out that the disease was caused by pure starvation, not just from eating corn like some people thought. Second, there were no medicines available, so he had to get really creative. Third, in what is just an unbelievable stroke of genius, he figured out how to synthesize the cure, niacin, from a common agricultural insecticide, a bug spray. And finally, using that method, he treated thousands upon thousands of people, saving who knows how many lives. You'd think he'd be hailed as a hero, right? Well, when the war ended, his brilliance and his heroism meant absolutely nothing to the new government. His mentor had been on the losing side of the war, so almost overnight, Francisco Grande Covián became an enemy of the state, a persona non grata in his own country. He literally had to go into hiding on a friend's farm to avoid being arrested. And what does he do while he's in hiding? He writes. He documents every single thing he learned in that nightmare in Madrid, and he drafts the scientific paper on pellagra that would eventually make him famous around the world. But when he finally came out of hiding, he was slapped with a 10-year ban from working at any university. He was exiled from the very world he loved.
But this terrible situation, this persecution, actually ended up pushing him toward the next great chapter of his life. An old friend from his training days in Denmark reached out with a job offer. And in 1953, Grande Covián packed up his family and moved to the United States. And this is where his painful past became his single greatest scientific asset. See, in Madrid, he had studied the absolute rock bottom of human nutrition, starvation. Now, in Minnesota, working for the U.S. Army, he took that deep knowledge and applied it to figuring out how to best fuel soldiers under the stress of calorie restriction. His firsthand understanding of what happens to the human body in deficit was priceless for military nutrition. It directly shaped how to keep soldiers effective in combat.
And then, working with his old buddy Ansel Keys, he made his most famous contribution of all. Together, they created the Keys-Grande-Anderson equation. What is that? Well, for the very first time, science had a mathematical formula that could predict exactly how different fats in your diet, the saturated, the mono, the poly, would affect your blood cholesterol. This thing was a revolution. It basically laid the scientific foundation for all the dietary advice on heart health for decades to come.
So, after 20 years of groundbreaking work in America, the political situation back in Spain had started to change, and in the early 1970s, Grande Covián decided to go home. But this was not about retirement. Not at all.
He had the perfect word for it. He called it his reincarnation. He had a new mission. He wasn't just coming home to relax. He was coming home to build, to teach, and to totally revitalize the science of nutrition in the very country that had once kicked him out.
And his impact was huge. He founded the Spanish Nutrition Society, he trained a whole new generation of scientists as a professor, and he became this beloved public figure, a voice of reason who was always fighting against all the fad diets and the junk science, always pushing his simple, powerful message, eat a little bit of everything, but always, always in moderation. So what's the big lesson from his incredible life? It's that real nutrition isn't about magic pills or crazy restrictive diets. It's about understanding the science, respecting your body, and remembering that simple truth that he fought for his entire life. We're past the point of just eating to survive. Now we have to eat for health.
And just so you know, this presentation was put together by Professor Francisco Jose Blanco of the Rey Juan Carlos University with help from AI.